Cool. So let's kind of break this down into something actionable. So the basic framework is about addiction. So let's get into the qualities of an addiction. And this will like make sense even though I'm being cute and funny right now. The qualities of an addiction. Addictions are effortless. They're not effortless to maintain, but they're effortless to start. You do a thing, you enjoy it, you continue to do it. Sometimes it has a really nice feedback loop in that it forces you to continue to do it. But no one ever went out of their way to get addicted to something. I shouldn't say that. Some maniac somewhere did that on principle just to see if it was possible. Everyone who starts smoking, though, is positive they're the person that's not going to get addicted to cigarettes. I'm certain the same thing is true of heroin as well. So, like, you just start doing the thing. It builds in intensity naturally. So if we think about the time thing, if you pick whatever creative activity that you're kind of procrastinating on or not starting on, and you look at your current life and you figure out how to work with it so that you can use some of that time and you give it a ridiculous amount. So you draw a self-portrait for 5 minutes a day right before you get in the shower. Let's like take that as our rule. And they're gonna be terrible, but if you remotely enjoy the process, you're not gonna care that it's terrible because it's only 5 minutes. Who has a negative opinion of something they did for 5 minutes? It's kind of difficult, right? But what's gonna start happening is one of two things. You're gonna get into the bathroom to start making those drawings earlier, or you're gonna take shorter showers, or you're gonna be late to work all the time. But if you enjoy the thing that you're doing and you are doing it regularly, you'll find that you're gonna start devoting more time to it, like an addiction. Though an addiction has a chemical thing and a brain thing that kind of helps with that. Maybe if you're lucky, you're like a sober addict, and this will really work for you. The reward is in the process. So when you smoke cigarettes, what is the process? The process is, well, one, you need nicotine, so you feed that. Awesome, now you feel better. Two, you bond with other people who smoke. You have a reason to leave work all day long. You get to look cool smoking a cigarette. There's all these things in that process that are rewarding. And basically the deal is like they're rewarding until they're not. Like cancer rolls along, no more reward in the process is terrible, and it's sending you very clear signals it's time to do something else. But in general, like it works till it doesn't. Like, you know, if you know anyone who's a hardcore stoner, that works for them until it doesn't. But like eventually, it might not. But you know, there comes a point where you're like, okay, that's cool. I did that. From 20 to 27, it was awesome. Working as a dishwasher, hanging out in my apartment all day, just sleeping till 2. All that shit was rad. And smoking lots of weed. And then 3, you focus on the present. So when you smoke a cigarette, you're definitely not thinking about like future fantasies about your life or whatever. You're just like doing this thing. You need to do it. And on a certain level, you enjoy doing it. You at least enjoy it more than you don't enjoy it. Because if that was the case, you'd stop because it'd be too painful or you'd get help. So you're just gonna focus on the present. Maybe if you do certain drugs, you're focused on obliterating the past. But I found that in my weed smoking days, I was not thinking much about the past and certainly not about the future. The qualities of a project. A project requires active work. You have to make a decision to do a project. Nobody accidentally starts a project. Like a month of your life doesn't go by and you go, oh shit, I can't believe I just wrote a book. I didn't mean to do that. 2, it requires maintenance of motivation. So if you're doing a really big project, like let's say something that's gonna take 2 years to come to fruition, when you get through those really laggy points of it where you're over it, you have to remind yourself of all the good things that are gonna happen when you finish this. And anyone who's done like if you've ever had a book published, like that's one of the best examples, because even once you finish that thing, it's not gonna show up in the world for 6 months to a year, depending on like the nature of your publisher, 6 months to 2 years, who knows? So if you're like, your motivation is running low, you literally have to sit there and go like, okay, when I finish this and this and this might happen. And then the reward is in the completion. Not always, like you're doing something you enjoy it, but in general, like when we set these big projects out for ourselves, we kind of get caught up in the end result of it, and we kind of like steal the joy from it. And so we think like, okay, when I do this, like what's going to happen? Like I'm going to get paid and I'm going to get speaking gigs, or I'm going to get a promotion, or whatever it is. But it's all like down the line. And then lastly, again, you're focused on a future goal. That's not true of everything, but the more miserable the project, the more you're focused on the future. It's like, if you can't wake up and be psyched about whatever thing you've trapped yourself into doing, writing a technical manual about, I don't know, building tanks. For some reason you agreed to do that and now your life is miserable. The whole time you'd be like, when I'm done with this tank building thing, I'm gonna go to the beach, whatever it is. But you're like, gotta be focused on the future. Okay, so if we get into the tools and materials idea, you need to excuse-proof your tools. So there's kind of two parts to this. Let's see if I have anything else here. Oh, that's my old talk. Let's move over here. Okay, so we get into tools. So there's kind of two problems. One is that we spend all this money on tools that we then don't use, like you're talking about. Some people, I'm sure somebody somewhere does the thing where they want to play guitar and they buy super nice stuff and immediately actually play guitar. I've never actually heard of someone doing that though. It's like the ski equipment thing, right? Where like somebody's always got a bunch of skiing equipment that they don't actually use because they're like, I'm gonna start skiing. How do you beat that? Well, one, it's way easier to start spending money on tools and using them if you're addicted to that process already. Examples would be, you could start with whatever is nearest you or easily accessible. So I think, like if I was gonna start painting, I would go to Target and go down the kids aisle. Like I'm being completely honest. I would use the shittiest, cheapest materials I could find so that I would have the confidence to burn through them so that every bad painting I made, I'd be like, whatever, that's 22 cents worth of material. Who cares? That would give me like, and that works for the way my brain works, is like, if I don't have any attachment to it, whether it's through time or through materials, all of a sudden I work really freely. So if I shoot photos on my iPhone, I'll make stuff I'm happy about, but I can just kind of chop down a lot of the nonsense about, yeah, whatever, I'm just shooting on my phone. Nothing worked out today. That's to be expected. It's my crappy iPhone. That's part of it, is starting with small materials so that you get used to working, and then you get sick of those materials and you work your way up to the good ones. You know, if you want to start cooking, the important thing is you need a knife, a cutting board, and some pans. Probably not even the right ones, right? You just need things you can cook in, and you need things that can chop stuff up. And then eventually you're like, this knife is very difficult to chop this with, and I'm chopping it all the time. I should get a real knife. And so you go and buy one, and you kind of like build up your arsenal in an organic and natural way, rather than going and plunking $1,000 down at like a Sephora or whatever place you go to buy kitchen stuff. I don't actually know. But you build your way up. So if you started with a crappy Target paints, at some point you'd hit this thing where you could tell that maybe your skill level had now surpassed your materials and you were frustrated. So then all of a sudden you go to Utrecht or whatever, and you buy some of whatever they have is the crappiest thing, but it's miles better than Target. And you just kind of keep building up that way, rather than doing the lunatic thing of scheduling a whole day just to buy fancy stuff that there's no evidence you'll use it, because if you wanted to paint, you'd be painting. That's the kind of logic I use as far as materials are concerned. Every time I find myself thinking like, oh, I wish I had this, I just go, you're not doing that anyway. You're full of it. Like, you don't need a video camera. You're barely using the iPhone or whatever it is. You have to kind of deconstruct some of the nonsense. The other one is, are you the kind of person that can't waste materials when they're nice? So some people, like, they'll go through art school and now they're broke, or they haven't worked in a long time on art stuff. In their mind, they need nice paper. They need $8 sheets of paper. $8 sheets of paper give me anxiety. Like, I do not want to touch that thing. I want newsprint that I can waste and burn through. But some people are used to drawing on $8 sheets of paper. The problem is that introduces the quality thing. And now the drawing needs to be good, it needs to be smart, it needs to be original, blah, 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 all this stuff to justify it. So again, you have to kind of understand what you're doing in the moment. But if you find yourself not doing something and then claiming it's because you need a nice tool, that's just the excuse you've created for not doing it. But the reality is once you bought that tool, there'd be a new excuse for not doing it. The flip side is if you're not working because you keep buying nice stuff and you're like, oh, I can't waste this or blah, blah, blah. Then the answer for you is file that stuff away and go to Target or go to Home Depot or whatever it is. Buy just the worst materials. If you want to be a photographer and you don't want to start with your phone, cool. Go buy the cheapest phone you can possibly, or the cheapest camera you can possibly find, and set out that time you're gonna work, and then get addicted to taking photos, and then be like, man, this camera sucks, and go buy something better. But set it up so that you can, you have a foundation to build on. Because if you're not doing it at all, you have no foundation whatsoever. And if you spend, if you haven't painted in a long time, and you spend a bunch of money on nice materials, and the day you go to paint, you've lost all the touch because it's been so long, you're not going to paint again because you're going to be like, this sucks. I spent an entire Saturday. I haven't painted in years. You'll say I lost it. It's no, you haven't lost it. You just need to do it every day. And you can't do it every day on a giant ass canvas in a studio with nice paints. Go to Target. Whenever you have an excuse thing, start to look at what tools could you do the project with and figure out the way you're wired, which thing is the problem? Is it you need to get in the habit, or you can't waste the nice materials? This is a good example. Franz Klein, super influential abstract expressionist. He couldn't afford paper really, so he stole phone books and used house painter's paint on them. And then he could dash them off because they were free. They were stolen, but whatever. And he would just draw them, kind of waste materials. And then actually when he painted from those phone book drawings, he used house painter's paint because it was dirt cheap and it was still oil paint. This painting is probably 6 feet tall, so it's probably a lot of black paint. A bucket of paint is going to be a lot easier to waste than, you imagine squeezing tubes and tubes of black paint in there and you're broke. The thing is, he never stopped. He didn't stop doing the phone book drawings, and he didn't stop painting with house painter's paint. And there's a good story that Picasso, around the same time, when commercial house painter's paint became available, commercial oil paints, he switched from artist paint to house painter's paint because he could waste it and not feel bad about it. And he would have been filthy rich already. Time. Okay, so time. Working with, not against reality. When do you have moments of time that you can convert to play? Rather than having the fantasy that you're suddenly going to free up a bunch of time in your life, which if that works for you, I'm very jealous. Instead, look at where is there chunks that you could steal away effortlessly. Your lunch break, when you're doing laundry. A really great one is, can you just stop doing laundry? There are services. Maybe it's worth the $20 a week. What kind of weird downtime do you have that you could use to do something with? Fake downtime. You watch TV, and this little, when do you do weird shit binge on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia when you're supposedly doing other things? Or when do you do laundry? When do you go grocery shopping? Once you have this picture of your time, you can start to look at moments, and then you can go okay, well, what could I do then? So to contextualize my rapping, it happens from 8 to 8:35 a.m. in my car on the parkway on the way to work. Initially, the way it worked is I'd pull over, I'd leave for work 5 minutes early, pull over and write for 5 minutes, but it turned out that didn't work. So I just get in the car and I put on a beat and boom. And then once I get to work, I'm done and I'm in work mode. That's time that I'm spending in my car already. So, but it works for that kind of activity, right? There are all these different versions of it. So your lunch break or whatever, do you really need that hour every lunch break? You couldn't steal 15 minutes to do something else during that time. You have to have like an actual clear picture of how you're spending your time, because otherwise it's like it's still a fantasy. It's like a budget when you don't actually know how much money you spend on coffee. So then there's content. So if content is a sticking point, what subjects can you work with right now? So one, there are the things you already know about that don't require any research whatsoever, like the things you have learned over the course of being alive. There are the everyday happenings that are going on around you. I was just thinking about this because there's this song I've been listening to a lot by this band Rye Coalition. It's like the song is like from 2002. The song is about a Woody Allen movie. It's a super intense song, and it's about the movie Sweet and Lowdown, the one about the jazz guitarist. And I was just thinking, like, you're a rock band, you're supposed to have like adventures. Nah, like they wrote a song about a Woody Allen movie and they like took it and owned it. And you have to wonder how often like stuff like that is happening, where someone is like literally just making art about something that they're watching. Like it could be, if you can't stop watching whatever, the TV show, for me it's Rick and Morty. So like if you can't stop watching Rick and Morty and you're like compelled to, maybe like your project needs to be about Rick and Morty, or like because Rick and Morty is actually, now they think about it, based on a satire of Back to the Future that was called Doc and Marty, and then later they took the satire they'd made where Doc was a lecherous old man trying to sleep with Marty, and they turned it into Rick and Morty, and instead he was his grandfather. So that's already somebody making art about some weird thing that they're compelled to be involved with already. And a lot of it is just like, you might have to come up with something artificially just to make sure that you start moving. If you don't have the faith in yourself just to be like, all right, let's just talk about what happened today. And it's like, you literally are writing a song about going to work and somebody didn't put the dishes away right and you get annoyed and you rearrange the mugs, which like already you're like, I could relate to that song. Like that would be a good song. So, you can always use those as a triggers. A really good example is the abstract expressionist Willem de Kooning said that whenever he had creative block, he would try to carve a perfect sphere out of plaster. The logic being that it would drive him insane and he would need to do anything else and would suddenly start making work again. Because like he was on this like fool's errand of this thing that would never be done and would never be right. So it was like it was essentially he picked the most boring thing possible to sort of get his brain to be like, all right, cool out, just do anything besides this. And I think like you could use that logic. Like, if you want to start being a writer and you really can't think of anything, start by doing something weird like before you do your first bit of work in the morning, like open up an email to yourself and write for 5 minutes and just describe whatever's happening in the office. And either that's going to get interesting or you're going to get bored and move on if you like the process. But you have to do something. And then if you absolutely must do research, what do you need to read or look at? That helps break down a lot of it, like the fashion design thing, right? If you can break that down and be like, okay, well, I need to do this, cool. When can that activity and the time overlap, where can you find that at? Where you can be like, you know what? Usually when I'm, I don't know, like, what's like a dumb thing everybody does? I mean, everybody does laundry, right? And it's like, maybe you do it and you have like something you normally do and you're like, no, when it's like in the dryer, I'll just literally sit in the basement and I'll read something on my phone. And like, that's how I'm gonna start reading again or whatever it might be. And then lastly, what can you publish? The reason I think that publishing is so good is because it helps to create the schedule. So even though you could be super disciplined and do the thing every day, it's going to be scary to publish stuff no matter what. It doesn't matter how good you are, it is going to be scary. So the best time to start is when you already know the stuff sucks. So that's fine. That's like cool, right? That like when you're confident that your thing is no good, well then no one can tell you otherwise. So it works out really well. And then 2, before anyone is paying attention. So that once you start putting bigger things out into the world, you're prepared for it. Because like maybe you have gotten some good feedback or some bad feedback, but it's a rote activity. You hit publish and you move on. I think a lot of people don't do that, and then they put their big thing out in the world, but they chicken out at the last minute because like it's just another kind of muscle or habit to build up. And then the other thing is like the best thing about social media is the fact that it's got a timeline. Like you can look at your Instagram or your Twitter or whatever, and you can see if you've been making stuff. And even if you've been making stuff and haven't been publishing it, once you start publishing stuff daily or weekly, and then you look on your YouTube channel and it says like, you realize the last upload was 3 weeks ago, and you're like, oh shit, I'm behind. And like that, it's almost like marking off a calendar. It's really helpful. But then the other thing is, what can you publish prolifically? So if you're actually doing a really big project, well, what can you sort of feed into that while you're doing that really big project? Sketches, process, the stuff you're reading, like what can you share? I think having some kind of marker of that time is really helpful. I thought I had like a good list of stuff. I swear I had one that said like, just share selfies if you have to. Like every time you work, just publish it. Like if the thing you're doing is too big to share, just like publish a photo of yourself and be like, I wrote 3 pages today. You know, just kind of like floss on everybody. It's fine. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's that simple. You want to take time, tools, context, and subject matter and align them in a way where you can actually work. And get your expectations to match reality. Like, if you work 2 jobs, writing a movie in 3 months is not a reasonable expectation. But wouldn't it be better to write that movie over 2 years than not write it at all? And just get rid of all the things that you have, like get rid of the belief that you need an hour at a time to do something. There's very few things where you actually do need an hour at a time to do something. But if you have 15 minutes consistently, you're going to get that thread through time anyway, and you're going to be able to eventually pick up an activity from day to day, even though you can't spend time on it. And eventually you're going to do that thing where other stuff will start to fall off the radar. And that's like the best thing, because ultimately you don't have time for whatever thing because it's not a priority. So like you basically hack it so you're addicted to it. It will just become a priority. It will become a priority to spend your entire lunch break doing whatever. It will become a priority to leave for work 5 minutes early so that you can wrap more. It will become a priority to get to Starbucks 10 minutes earlier so you can write in the parking lot. As long as like those things are aligned. If the expectations are out of tune, you're going to demotivate yourself because you're never going to get enough work done. And like that's like a huge thing. Like you have to have expectations that match reality, and that doesn't mean being defeatist. It just means being like, look, if this was important, I'd be doing it already. I'm not. So it's like there's no way I'm just going to magically motivate myself. So instead you go like, okay, well, what can I do? And then like that's going to, if you're doing it right, it's going to build up because you're going to have like a happy little moment every day, even when it goes shitty. Like even when you take your whole lunch break to write, and then later you're like, oh, garbage. Oh, well, shit happens, right? But like, as long as you don't have this crazy expectation of like a fairy tale, like I'm gonna write my novel during my lunch breaks, and then it's gonna be amazing when I'm on the cover of Time magazine and they talk about how I wrote my novel on my lunch breaks at my terrible job. You do that, yeah, that's a recipe for disaster, right? Like you're gonna be trying to live in a fantasy, but if you're like, I'm working on my novel and I love the process, you'll just start stealing more time. And like maybe you'll do the thing like you'll stop doing your laundry, not like a hobo or something, just like you'll drop it off at the place so that you now have an extra 3 hours a week or whatever it is. Or maybe you'll be like, you know what, I honestly don't need to watch like any Netflix anymore because like I got this other thing and it's actually fun. It's not a project. Because like, you know, just start to like, whenever you say like project, just be like project, you know, instead think about like activities, like creative activities. Like that sounds cool. Not like I need to work on my practice or whatever it is like art people say.
I guess I would have a question. How do you like power through the imposter syndrome about, you know, actually doing something? You know, you see that, you know, you think you know, you got something, but you always have that lingering doubt throughout?
You have to brainwash yourself, I think. So like that band Self-Defense Family, so they still have it. They had a Tumblr for a long time. They answered it like so many questions, and so many of their questions were about like negative feedback and confidence that I would be like, oh, weird. Like I feel the same way. And I did like 3 things. Like I read stuff by this Scientologist, Grant Cardone, who's like a lunatic that I love. And that helped a lot. I forced myself to listen to the sound of my own voice all the time. That helps a lot. Because like, it's a weird thing to say, but it's like, once you're comfortable with the sound of your own voice, life is so much better. And I started doing like weird things. Like I made a video about this, like how if I went to like a coffee shop, you know how like there's the big joke, like all men think the barista's flirting with them? I know that's not happening, but if someone smiled a little bit, I would be like, that's because I'm a very handsome guy. And so I would do shit like that. And I apply that logic to everything. So until you don't need to anymore. Because like that's the idea. So like with creative work, one, if I just look at something and like it at all, I'm like, oh cool, I'm awesome. That's nice. I'm a great graphic designer. Like I love looking at like the slides that said like teaching project. I was like, that was super good. That kind of helps. But the other thing is just that like I don't know how to say this, like to own that you give a shit. So if you suck at something, but you give a shit about it, you're gonna get better at it. So there's almost no need to worry about not being good at it. Like if you know specifically mistakes you're making, you fix them. And then like you're even better than you were the day before. So the normal thing like that kind of happens is like reasonable people know that they're not the best at something because they're self-aware. But the problem is that lots of unreasonable people don't have that filter at all. You're always in competition with them. And so I just like, I try my best to be the unreasonable person, but I'm like way too self-aware. But I just go like, I made this. As far as I can tell, this was the best effort I could do. Like, I've never designed something and thought, oh, I could have done this better. I mean, I guess I have, like if I was being lazy, but I've never designed something where I actually was trying and then thought I could have done that better. So then I just owned like, okay, cool. This is what I'm capable of. And it's the best I'm capable of. Therefore it's good. And it took like serious brainwashing because like I am a super like, not am, because I'm less now, but I was like just really insecure. I thought everything I made sucked. If I liked something I made, I thought that it meant I was like an egomaniac, like all this stuff. And then, and eventually I was just like, dude, you're not making anything else. So it doesn't matter. And like the other thing is, it doesn't sound funny, but my general philosophy is everything sucks and everyone has bad taste. So my stuff sucks, your stuff sucks, your stuff sucks. And the reason that I like something that sucks and someone else hates that thing, they're never like in alignment. That's all super random. Like some terrible movie is popular and I think it's terrible. And if quality mattered, then everyone would think it was bad, right? And I just realized like, oh no, it's like my particular brand of bad taste likes this, this, and this, hates this, this, and this, and is indifferent to these things. So now like if I make work and it gets rejected by a client, I just don't care. Like I honestly don't, because like it's not like I was gonna do something different. Like I did the best I could. They have bad taste. That's fine. That's like their prerogative. I'll make some new stuff and hopefully like I'll address the bad taste and then it will work. But like I don't think you do anything to get over imposter syndrome. You just own your experiences. So like eventually you teach long enough that you're like, I'm good at this. And if I'm not good at this, I'm hiding it really, really well. So who cares? I'm like, you know, you just sort of own like, I've been doing this long and I'm not gonna do it differently. So then like there are no other options. And it's like I don't know, it's like a conscientious thing to try to deconstruct. But I just like, that's why I love looking at examples of things that I think are terrible. One of my favorite things is to look at really famous graphic designers and find work by them that I think is like the pits. And then I go like, okay, cool. That is so bad and it has no bearing on their career whatsoever. What damage can I possibly do to myself? I just Dr. Seuss wrote The Cat in the Hat Comes Back. That book sucks. Like, if you have a kid and you've ever had to read that book, it's a didactic piece of shit. And then I think like, oh, okay, that doesn't make Dr. Seuss bad. It just means you wrote a bad book. I'm gonna make bad work. Like, something's not gonna be resolved. And it's just weird. Like, I was thinking about this, I was listening to a song, and there's a stretch of it that I just was like, this part sucks. I wish it was not there. But I don't not listen to the song. I just go like, oh, like they made a weird decision. And I just kind of try to apply those same logic to myself. Like, it's unreasonable to think I will like everything I make. It's unreasonable to think everything I make will be good. So the main focus is just process. Like, am I doing these things in alignment with each other in a way that if all of it just goes to hell, client doesn't pay, they hate everything, printer screws up the project. If all that goes to hell, well, I feel good about the steps I took, like from A to B. That's like kind of like this class, like I mixed this up tonight. Like I did a totally different structure, and I was just like, this might totally suck, but at this moment, I think it's the right thing to do, so I'm gonna run with it. And if it does suck, well, it's not gonna suck. I'm just gonna go like, oh, that didn't work. That exercise didn't work, so don't do that. This was awesome, do it earlier, or whatever. But I'm still gonna think it's rad either way, if that makes sense. I don't know, I feel like I'm like random. Basically, brainwash yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like this is like the instance where, like, thinking that you're made in God's image is like such a helpful belief. Like, I don't really hold that belief, but I think that's like such a helpful. That to me is genius. Like, I kind of wish like I did believe that, because like I would be even more like, yeah,